Stop scrolling. Put down that magnifying glass for just 30 seconds. You are not holding a bicentennial 1945 or 1956 fantasy. You are holding the echo of a gunshot, the dust of the interstate highway, and the ghost of a double die waiting to be seen. Welcome to Legacy Coins USA. Here, we don't peddle the million-dollar lie of superimposed value. We reveal the fortune hidden in the wheat stalks. We show you the crimson luster of a Denver gem and the faint, mechanical whisper of a repunched mint mark that turns pocket change into a vault key. Stop chasing the clickbait. Start seeing the history. Grab that loop. Your real legacy is in your palm. Let's hunt. Let's play. The first up. The coin you are holding in your mind's eye is not merely a piece of currency, but a metallic ghost story. A whisper from the mint's wartime foundry that has become hopelessly tangled in the cacophony of internet lore and clickbait fantasy. Let us be absolutely crystalline from the very first breath of this exploration. You cannot, under any law of physics or American numismatic history, have a 1945 bicentennial coin. The word bicentennial is a sacred marker tied exclusively to the year 1976, a grand, fireworks-laden celebration of 200 years since the Declaration of Independence. To fuse 1945 with bicentennial is to create a mythological chimera born from the fever dreams of viral videos promising overnight billionairedom. What you actually possess is a 1945 Lincoln wheat cent, a coin forged in the crucible of the final year of World War II, a far more humble soldier than the million-dollar titans of legend. But do not close your heart to it yet, for within that humble bronze disc lies a story of survival, sacrifice, and metallurgical desperation that is, in its own quiet way, more valuable than the loudest, most fraudulent eBay listing you've ever scrolled past. To understand the soul of the 1945 wheat penny, you must first divorce it from the glittering lie of the bicentennial Rare USA headline that has polluted your search. The year was 1945, and the world was bleeding out the final drops of a global conflict. Copper was not a coinage metal at that moment. It was ammunition. The very brass casings that ejected from fighter planes over the Pacific and artillery shells that rumbled across the Rhine were the priority for this reddish gold metal. Consequently, the United States Mint was still operating under the shadow of the 1942 to 1946 emergency alloy mandate. Your 1945 penny is not the familiar 95% copper of pre-war memory. It is a shell case set. It is composed of zinc-coated steel planchets that were, in many instances, melted down from spent cartridge casings retrieved from battlefields and training grounds. This is the reason why a 1945 cent, if it hasn't been carefully preserved, often looks dull, gray, or scabrous with rust, because it is fundamentally steel wearing a thin, fragile coat of zinc to masquerade as copper. Let us dig ruthlessly into the unimaginable worth narrative you've been force-fed. The internet has weaponized numismatics, turning every grandmother's change jar into a supposed lottery ticket for the 1%. There exists a 1943 bronze cent, the accidental mix-up of pre-war copper blanks, that is worth a fortune. There exists a 1955 double die obverse that commands the price of a small house. But the 1945 wheat penny? It is a study in quiet, dignified mediocrity. Over 1 billion of these steel soldiers were struck across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. They are not rare. They are the opposite of rare. They are the ubiquitous, overlooked sparrows of the coin world. A circulated, rusty, zinc-peeling 1945 cent found in a drawer is worth, at this very moment, perhaps 3 to 5 cents to a dealer who buys copper scrap in bulk. This is not a fortune. It is the cost of a piece of chewing gum from a vending machine that hasn't existed since 1980. The millions of dollars hook used in those videos applies exclusively to coins that are either experimental patterns locked in the Smithsonian vaults or mint errors so astronomically rare that the FBI would investigate their discovery. Your 1945 cent is a beautiful, tangible piece of history, but it is not a financial anomaly. Turn the coin over. Look directly beneath the year. Do you see a tiny D for Denver or an S for San Francisco? Or is there a blank, smooth expanse of steel? That blankness means it was born in Philadelphia. Now, look at the color and the texture. Is it a dull, battleship gray with black spots? That is oxidation. The zinc has failed. and the steel core is weeping rust. That is a 3-cent story. But if you find a 1945 San Francisco cent that still glimmers with a bright, silvery white sheen, with not a single fleck of red rust, and every single grain of wheat on the reverse is sharp enough to draw blood from your fingertip, that is a gem, uncirculated specimen. And in that specific icy state, among the hardcore collectors of Lincoln wheat cents, a 1945 can cross the threshold of $15 to $30. Still not millions, still not a car payment, but it is a 30,000% increase over face value. That is the quiet, honest fortune of the wheat cent. The true, spine-tingling error that makes the 1945 penny a dangerous coin to spend is not the standard strike. It is the double die reverse, DDR. This is where the myth of superimposed value finds a sliver of truth. Due to a misalignment in the minting hub, some 1945 cents exhibit a distinct, ghost-like shadow doubling on the reverse lettering, specifically on 1 cent and E pluribus unum. This is not the blurry strike doubling caused by a loose die, which is worthless. This is a crisp, machine-caused rotation that makes the text look like it has a transparent twin sitting just slightly askew. This is the white whale. If you take a jeweler's loupe or even a strong magnifying glass on your phone and you see that distinct, clean shadow on the words 1 cent on the reverse, you have entered the realm of a 4-figure coin. We are talking about a specimen that could command anywhere from $500 to over $3,000, depending on condition. This is the only scenario where your 1945 cent sheds its identity as common war scrap and becomes a rare USA coin. But you must have the eyes to see it. The difference between damage and doubling is the difference between a penny and a mortgage payment, and that chasm is filled only with knowledge, not hope. Finally, let us return to the redemptive power of the wheat penny's design itself, which is the only true fortune you are guaranteed to possess. Victor David Brenner's 1909 masterpiece featuring the profile of Lincoln flanked by those elegant, sweeping Durham wheat stalks is, quite simply, the most American design ever to grace the lowly cent. The 1945 issue is the penultimate year of this design's life. By 1946, the nation was healing. Copper returned, but the clock was ticking on the wheat reverse. In 1959, they would bulldoze the wheat stalks away and replace them with the cold, severe geometry of the Lincoln Memorial. So, banish from your mind the gaudy, superimposed fantasy of the bicentennial rare USA coin. That is a phantom of internet marketing, a lie designed to harvest your attention. Instead, embrace the raw, unpolished truth. You hold a 1945 Lincoln wheat cent made of steel salvaged from the Second World War. Its value is not in the millions you dreamed of, but in the weight of the history it carries. It is the coin your great-grandfather might have used to buy a newspaper announcing the death of Hitler or the surrender of Japan. It is a memento mori from an era of rationing and victory gardens. That is the unimaginable worth that no Google search and no flashy YouTube thumbnail can ever give you. It is a fortune of memory, not money. And if, by some astronomical stroke of luck, you peer through a loop and see that ghostly doubled 1 cent winking back at you, well then, and only then, has the clickbait become prophetic. Thanks for watching, and don't forget that subscribe to my channel. Coin number 2. The coin you are asking about tonight is a shapeshifter, a trickster of the numismatic world that has been violently twisted into the costume of a holiday it never attended. Let me seize your attention with the iron grip of absolute certainty. A coin dated 1953 has absolutely nothing, zero, zip, nary a whisper, to do with the American Bicentennial. That celebration was a singular, once-in-a-lifetime volcanic eruption of patriotism that occurred exclusively in 1976. To call a 1953D Lincoln wheat cent a bicentennial rare USA coin is the equivalent of calling a classic Ford Thunderbird a moon landing rover. It is a cruel fiction manufactured by the shadowy, click-hungry corners of the internet where fortunes are promised, but only disappointment is delivered. However, now that we have forcibly ripped away the garish veil of that particular falsehood, we can finally see the coin for what it truly is, a beautiful, bronze-toned messenger from the placid, confident, and occasionally lethal calm of the Dwight D. Eisenhower era. It is not a coin of revolution and fireworks like 1976. It is a coin of Levittown, of howdy doody, and of a nation bracing itself for the hydrogen age. Your 1953D Lincoln wheat cent is a repatriated warrior of the copper standard. Unlike the ghostly, zinc-skinned steel war pennies of the previous decade, this coin represents the triumphant return of peace and the bountiful American earth. By 1953, the Korean War armistice was on the horizon, and the strategic metal hoarding of World War II was a fading memory. The United States Mint had joyfully reverted to the classic 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc alloy, affectionately known as bronze. This is why, if you hold a 1953 cent up to the light, it does not gleam with the sterile surgical silver of a steely. Instead, it glows with a warm, deep, and luscious orange-red luster when new, or a smooth, dignified milk chocolate patina when aged. This is the red and brown that collectors whisper about in reverent tones. The coin in your hand was struck from the same recipe that built the Statue of Liberty's skin and the great steam boilers of the Industrial Revolution. It is a chemical promise of durability that the wartime emergency cents could never keep. And it is the reason why a 1953 penny found in a jar today still looks like money, not a rusty washer. Let us now navigate the treacherous, uncharted waters of the Liberty coins featuring value superimposed myth, as it applies to this 1953 Denver specimen. The internet loves to show images of Lincoln cents with a ghostly holographic $1 million, or a blurred, rare, floating over Honest Abe's stoic face. This is a digital parlor trick. It is a post-production edit made in a video editing software, not a feature of the United States Mint's engraving department. The only value superimposed on your 1953 D cent is the word 1 cent flanked by the proud sheaves of Durham wheat on the reverse. That value is not a suggestion. It is a legal mandate. Yet, the mystery deepens when you consider the phrase e pluribus unum, which arches like a stone bridge across the top of the reverse. In 1953, this Latin motto, out of many, one, carried a specific Cold War weight. It was the nation's ideological sword raised against the monolithic collectivism of Soviet communism. Every time a child in 1953 bought a piece of bazooka bubblegum with this penny, they were holding a tiny copper manifesto that declared the strength of the individual states united against a common foe. The value, therefore, is not in the dollar sign. It is in the philosophical spine of a nation on the brink of the space race. But let us not abandon hope entirely. This is the moment where we part the velvet ropes and enter the exclusive, high-stakes back room of numismatic deviations. While the common 1953 D cent is a workhorse worth perhaps 15 cents in worn condition and a few dollars in gleaming red uncirculated condition, there exists a shadow world of mint errors that can transmute this copper-based metal into something resembling gold. For the 1953 D specifically, the king of errors is the RPM, the repunched mint mark. As a mint worker at Denver hammered the D into the working die, the punch bounced, slipped, and struck again a millimeter off center. Under high magnification, and I demand you look now, you might see a second, faint, ghostly D peeking out from behind or beside the primary D. This is not damage. This is a mechanical hiccup frozen in bronze for eternity. A strong, unmistakable 1953 D RPM, especially the coveted RPM-1 variety, in pristine condition, is not a 10-cent coin. It is a trophy that can command $50 to $200 from a collector who understands that true rarity lies not in the year, but in the blunder. The narrative of the 1953 D wheat penny is also the sunset story of an American icon. By 1953, Victor David Brenner's masterpiece design, the solemn profile of Lincoln on the front and those elegant, cascading Durham wheat stalks on the back, had been with the nation for 44 years. It had survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression and the dawn of the atomic age. But the winds of change were blowing through the Treasury Department. There was a growing sentiment that the coinage was looking stodgy, agrarian, and outdated in the age of tail fins and television. The wheat stalks were a symbol of the 19th century farmer. The 1950s were about the suburban commuter and the nuclear scientist. Unbeknownst to the workers at the Denver Mint striking your 1953 D coin, the clock was ticking loudly. They had only 5 more years of wheat harvesting left before the design would be plowed under forever in 1959 to make way for the cold, modernist marble of the Lincoln Memorial. Your coin is not a beginning. It is a brilliant, bronze-colored twilight. Now, let us confront the specter of condition. For in the world of 700 million coin populations, condition is the only ladder to value. You must understand the phenomenon of red versus brown. A 1953 D penny that has sat in a sock drawer since the day Eisenhower was inaugurated will still possess nearly all of its original, fiery, orange-red mint luster. This is designated RD, red, on a professional grading slab. This is the coin that looks like it was struck 5 minutes ago. Due to copper's aggressive tendency to oxidize and tone down into chocolate brown, BN, or reddish brown, RB. True red examples of the 1953D are remarkably scarce, despite the huge mintage. Finding a 1953D in MS67 red, a near-perfect supernova of luster with no bag marks, is a genuine numismatic achievement. While the common circulated penny is fodder for the Coinstar machine, a top-tier, high-grade red specimen of the 1953D can fetch anywhere from $150 to over $400 in a competitive auction. That is a 40,000% return on face value. It is not a private jet, but it is a very nice steak dinner for two, paid for by a coin most people throw away. Finally, we must return to the cruel and hilarious irony of the Bicentennial Rare USA label. Your 1953D Lincoln Cent will celebrate its own bicentennial in the year 2153, long after you and I have joined Abraham Lincoln in the great beyond. The lie of the superimposed bicentennial value is a modern plague because it preys on the very real and very human hope that a forgotten treasure might change everything. I will not rob you of hope. I will redirect it. Do not look for the word bicentennial on a 1953 coin. You will die of old age before you find it. Instead, I implore you to look for the double die obverse, DDO. Pick up a magnifying glass and stare into the eyes of Abraham Lincoln. Look at the letters of liberty and the numbers 1953. Do you see a crisp, shelf-like separation of the image? Do you see two noses? Two dates? This is the lottery ticket. A 1953D with a prominent double die obverse is the only scenario where this coin jumps the shark from pocket change into used car territory. It is a $2,000 to $5,000 secret hidden in plain sight. And that, dear seeker, is the only fortune this Denver wheat stock has to offer, a fortune that requires eyes, not a clickbait headline, to discover. Coin number 3. You are cradling in your palm or squinting at through the glare of your phone screen is not a guest. At the 1976 Bicentennial Ball, let this truth land like a gavel on the bench of numismatic justice. The year 1956 and the word bicentennial exist in entirely separate dimensions of American time. The bicentennial was a gaudy, flag-waving, fireworks-blasting celebration of 200 years of independence. Your 1956 coin is a silent, dignified bronze relic from the exact midpoint of the American century, a moment when the country was neither at war nor in recession, but trapped in a strange, suburban lullaby between the Korean armistice and the first tremors of Vietnam. To call this a bicentennial coin is to mistake a calm, flat lake for a raging typhoon. But now that we have exorcised that particular digital demon, we can sink our teeth into the true, unvarnished, and frankly magnificent story of the 1956 Lincoln Wheat Cent, a coin that is not a lottery ticket for billionaires, but a copper time capsule from the year the interstate highway system was born, and Elvis Presley first shook his hips on national television. Let us first worship at the altar of the date itself, 1956. This is a year of immense, yet quiet significance for the Lincoln Cent series. You must understand that by 1956, the venerable wheat ear reverse design, those elegant, sweeping stalks of Durham wheat, was breathing its last, rattling breaths. It had been a constant companion to the American people since 1909, surviving the Titanic, 2 world wars, and the Great Depression. But the winds of aesthetic change were howling through the marble halls of the Treasury. The design was considered by many in power to be stodgy, agrarian, and hopelessly old-fashioned in an era of sleek tail fins, jet aircraft, and the dawn of the space race. The 1956 issue, therefore, is one of the penultimate chapters of the Wheat Cent saga. It is a coin struck in the shadow of its own extinction. When you hold a 1956 penny, you are holding the final full-year production before the mint began seriously preparing the dies for the cold, severe, and modernist Lincoln Memorial design that would arrive like an unwelcome concrete slab in 1959. This coin is not a celebration of a bicentennial birth. It is a quiet bronze elegy for the death of a design. Now, let us address the phantom letter that is conspicuously and maddeningly absent from your description. You have provided a date, 1956, with no mint mark. That silence is not a mistake. It is the loudest roar in the entire Lincoln cent canon. A 1956 Lincoln cent without a tiny D, Denver, or S, San Francisco. Beneath the date is a child of the Philadelphia Mint, the mother church of American coinage. And in 1956, the Philadelphia Mint was a veritable volcano of copper. It erupted with an almost incomprehensible cascade of over 420 million Lincoln cents. To give you a visual that will haunt your dreams of riches, imagine every man, woman, and child in the United States in 1956 receiving nearly 3 brand new pennies directly from the Philadelphia Mint. That is the scale of this production. This staggering, gargantuan mintage is the steel-toed boot that crushes the fantasy of unimaginable worth for the standard 1956 issue. The law of supply and demand is an unforgiving mistress. You cannot have a rare coin when over 400 million identical siblings were dumped into cash registers, gumball machines, and the pockets of children buying comic books for a dime. But do not cast this coin aside in disgust just yet, for we are about to enter the shimmering, high-stakes world of condition rarity. The vast, overwhelming majority of those 420 million Philadelphia cents were thrown into circulation, where they rubbed against keys, dropped into parking meters, and were ground down by the relentless friction of commerce. They turned a dull, lifeless chocolate brown. They acquired nicks, gouges, and the general weariness of a decade of service. Those coins, even today, are worth perhaps 3 cents as copper scrap. However, if you are holding a 1956 Philadelphia cent that looks like it was struck by the Mint's hammer 5 minutes ago, you have crossed the threshold into a different financial universe. Look for the red RD designation. A 1956 cent with full, blazing, fiery orange-red mint luster, untouched by oxygen or human fingers, is an anomaly. Copper is a reactive, temperamental metal. It wants to turn brown. A 1956 Lincoln cent graded MS-67 red, a near-perfect supernova of original color, is not a $1 million coin, but it is a $200 coin. That is a 20,000% increase over face value. Paid by a collector who understands that perfection in a coin, this common is a genuine, breathtaking rarity. The true, heart-stopping treasure of the 1956 Philadelphia issue lies not in the standard strike, but in the violent mechanical accidents that occurred in the middle of the night at the Mint. We are speaking, of course, of the double die obverse, DDO. This is the Liberty coins featuring value superimposed myth made flesh. Forget the clickbait holograms. This is a real, tangible, and lucrative doubling of the image. In 1956, a mint worker at Philadelphia improperly aligned the hub that impresses the design into the die. The result was a master die that possessed a slight, ghostly, but crisp secondary image. When coins were struck from this damaged die, they emerged with Abraham Lincoln sporting 2 distinct lips, 2 chins, and most importantly, the word liberty and the motto, "In God We Trust," displaying a dramatic, shelf-like doubling. This is the white whale of 1956. This is the 1956 DDO FS 101. If you take a jeweler's loupe and see that unmistakable, mechanical shadow on the lettering, you are not holding pocket change. You are holding a key to a vault that contains anywhere from $1,500 to $7,000, depending on the crispness of the doubling and the redness of the copper. This is the only scenario where the words rare and 1956 belong in the same breath. Let us turn our gaze to the reverse, to the words E pluribus unum, and the elegant, sweeping wheat stalks that cradle the denomination 1 cent. In 1956, this reverse design was the visual shorthand for American prosperity. This was the coin of the happy days before anyone knew the term. It was the coin a teenager used to drop into a jukebox to hear Heartbreak Hotel for the 3rd time in a row. It was the coin that bought a copy of the New York Times with the headline about Eisenhower signing the Federal Aid Highway Act, a piece of legislation that would literally pave the nation in concrete and change the way Americans lived forever. The wheat stalks themselves are not just decoration. They are a lingering ghost of a more agrarian past, a symbol of the harvest that was slowly being paved over by the very suburban boom this coin helped finance. The value of this coin is not in the $1 million you have been promised by a computer algorithm. The value is in the weight of that specific, optimistic, and slightly anxious history. We must also confront the strange, almost alchemical phenomenon of woodies. Because the copper alloy used in 1956 was not always perfectly blended at the rolling mill, some planchets, the blank metal discs, suffered from improper mixing of the copper and tin. When these planchets were struck, they resulted in coins with a streaky, two-tone appearance, swirling lines of lighter and darker bronze that resemble the grain of polished wood. This is not a mint error that adds massive value like the DDO, but it is a delightful aesthetic fingerprint that makes your 1956 penny unique. In a sea of 420 million identical coins, a woody 1956 Lincoln cent is a rebel. It is a coin that refused to be homogenized. Collectors with a keen eye for character will pay a premium of $20 to $50 for a pristine, high-grade example with vivid wood grain toning. It is a quiet reminder that even in the age of industrial mass production, the soul of the metal sometimes rebels and creates accidental art. Finally, we must bury the bicentennial rare USA lie once and for all, but we will do so with a twist that honors the coin you actually possess. The 1956 Lincoln wheat cent will not witness an American bicentennial until the year 276. If you are reading this, the odds of you being around to pop that particular bottle of champagne are, shall we say, astronomical. The fortune you seek in this coin is not the gaudy, superimposed fantasy of a click-hungry content farm. It is the fortune of the hunt. You have been given the precise coordinates. Look for the double die-overs on the front. Look for the bright red luster. Look for the woody toning on the back. These are the secret handshakes of the numismatic world. This 1956 cent is a teacher. It is teaching you that the real treasure is not in the fake bicentennial label, but in the knowledge and the eyesight required to separate a 3-cent piece of copper scrap from a $200 gem or a $7,000 error. Now, pick up that magnifying glass. The ghost of 1956 is waiting.